Let's talk about a built-in Python function called zip. Zip takes two or more iterable objects, combines them together, and returns another iterable object called a zip object. So suppose we had two lists. We have people, and in the people list we have John, Paul, George, and Ringo, of course. We have an associated list called colors, and in the associated list we have each person's favorite color. Since each person in the people list is associated with each color in the colors list, we can imagine that we might want to combine them together somehow. We could deal with these two lists separately, but we might also like to create maybe a third list, and that list maybe has tuples of the person name and their favorite color. Zip can do that for us. We simply call zip and pass people and colors as arguments. Zip will iterate through both lists at the same time, combining the elements of each list into a tuple. So the result of this is going to be John, blue as the first item. Then zip moves on to the next position and combines Paul and red into a tuple, and so on. I mentioned that zip returns an iterable object. It doesn't return a list or a tuple, but an object that has the capability of producing these tuples one at a time. Let's see that in action. Here are a couple of lists that we'll use as examples. We have 3 runners and their associated race times. 56.2 is Spike's time, 49.7 is Sammy's time, and 45.3 is Sally's time. This happens a lot that we have 2 different objects that contain corresponding data. If we wanted to print out each runner and their time, there are a few ways we could do that. We could use the length of runners as an index for a for loop. And then we could print out the runner and the race time using that index. Let's try that. And we see Spike is associated with his time, Sammy with Sammy's time, and Sally with Sally's time. But instead of using range as the iterator here, we can use the objects themselves, which is a little more satisfying. Let's comment this out for a second and just see what we get if we zip these up. So I'm using the zip function, and notice that I put the runners list in the first position, followed by the race time list. If we print these out, we see we get tuples, and the runner is associated with their race time in each tuple. Now we know that we can expand a tuple into variables, so let's say for runner, time in zip, and then let's print the runner and their time. That works as well. So now all we have to do is uncomment this. It somehow seems more natural to be iterating through these objects and use runner and time in our print statement rather than accessing the lists with an index. And that works well. Zip doesn't give us a list, even though we used lists as the inputs, but we can use zip to create a list. And zip also takes other iterators as inputs. So if we wanted to number the runners, for instance, remember that the zip function returns a zip object, which is not a list, but it is iterable, so we can put it inside the list constructor and get a list object. So now we have numbers associated with each runner. Notice a couple things that this example shows. First, that we can combine different types of iterables. Range is iterable. It's not a list though. Runners is iterable. It's a list. It doesn't matter that these are different data types, just that they're both iterable. Second, the length of the iterables does not have to be the same. So range 1 to 100 actually has 99 items in it. Runners only has 3. The zip object that's produced is just as long as the shortest iterable in the argument list. So runners was the shortest iterable with 3 items. The list that we got had 3 items. That makes sense. If you run out of items in one iterable, how do you decide what to do with the remaining items in another? Finally, note that we can include as many iterables as we want in the argument list. So if we want to bring the race times back in, that's no problem. The race times get thrown into the tuples along with everything else. So keep this function in mind. You'll see it a lot in other people's code, and you'll probably find places to use it yourself.